what was done very
Yes,
briefly because
yes.
I did not attend yesterday's class.
Okay, so today let's discuss. Let's revise. Quickly what we had seen in the last session of our Docker Compose, and today we are going to also use Docker Compose to set up our another container Jenkins. But let's understand what Docker Compose is, and let's revise it. We have already understood it, but let's revise it. What is Docker Compose? Basically, when we run any container, let's take an example of our Jenkins as well as our Nexus. So I'm just taking out these two commands which we had used for starting up these two containers. Yes, so these are the commands which we had used. This one. So in this, if we see, like, if when we run the container, we have to specify a lot of details about the container which we want to start. For example, name of the container, then volume, then port forwarding, like publishing the ports, even the name of the image, right? And if we are setting the environment variables, again that list of the environment variables also we need to set. So the list goes on and on, right? So when you run a container, you specify different things about that container, and the docker run command becomes lengthy as well as complex, right? Even for this also, if we check out this docker run command which we use to start Nexus container, here also we can see a lot of details or a lot of arguments we have sent here, right? So a docker run command is not a easy way to start the container if you have different lot of things to be defined at the time of creating and running the container. Environment variables, publishing the ports, name of the container, even volume mounts. If you have multiple volume mounts, again you have to specify them as a array of the argument again. So this makes your docker run command lengthy as well as complex. Point number one. Point number two, if your application consists of multiple containers, let's say if you want to start your application, and to start that application you need to run 5 containers. One is front end, one is back end, third one is, let's say, database, fourth one is some other let's say a component of your application, right? So when you want to start your application, for starting an application you need to run 5 containers, so you need to run 5 docker run commands. That is again not a efficient way of starting an application, running 5 different docker run commands and then starting the application. Then you want to, let's say, kill the application, then you will say docker container stop, then you will do docker container prune. So for cleaning up also, this is not a efficient way for cleaning up as well as for starting up. Docker run, which we use to create the container as well as start the containers, and docker container stop is the one which we use to stop the container, as well as docker prune to delete the containers. So cleaning up process as well as starting up process is not very efficient with the help of these commands. So what is the solution for this then? The solution is Docker Compose file. So Docker Compose is solution to these both the problems. Problem one is we want to get rid of this unnecessary lengthy docker run commands. Second, a cleaning up process as well as starting up the process of an application which, let's say, consists of more than 1 container. For that also we want to come up with some efficient way. So for both of these, Docker Compose is the solution. So Docker Compose, we had yesterday defined one Docker Compose file, which is a YAML file Okay, so there are few aspects of this YAML file. So this is the version of the DockerCompose we want to use. So you can use any version for that matter. What interesting points are from here? Services. So every container is a service. Services. So inside this we have defined our nexus. So this is the name of my service, nexus. And for this nexus, whatever as a part of this service, which container I want to start, which image I want to use, which environment variables I want to say define. So all those things will go inside this nexus. So the image first is which image I want to use. This is what we have defined. What should be our container name? We have defined this. These things we use to define as a part of our commands, as a part of our Docker run command. We can see here name, our container name. This is how we used to define, right? Then image, this is where we used to define our image, this one. As a part of these things used to go as a part of our Docker run command. Now we are defining them inside a file called DockerCompose file. Then ports. Even to publish the different ports, we have to define -p. We have to define those ports with the, if you want to expose or publish multiple ports, so you have to do something like this, -p 8085:8085, right? So multiple ports we have to define. So those are going inside this now. Ports, as this is the list of the port, so the list goes in the YAML with dash. Dash, this is the first element. Dash, this is the second element. Then volumes. For volume we have to do something like this, -v, name of the volume, colon, the location of the container which we want to mount. This will go like this, volumes, then name of the volume and the location inside the container which we want to mount. Then environment variable. We have also seen environment variables, right? So if I want to define any environment variables which should get set inside my container, so we had discussed two ways. One way is to define all those environment variables inside a file. So here we have that. See here, this one. Here we had started our Nexus container using the environment variables defined in that file. This one, right? So this --env- file, again this particular argument we have to send to our Docker run command. That goes here, env file, and here you specify the location of your env file. So this my.env, or we can say nexus.env to make it more understandable, right? So nexus.env, and this is our env file in which we have all the nexus related environment variables defined, right? So let me just rename it to nexus, nexus.env. All these now will go inside our compose file. Instead of defining the a list of like these settings, we have to define as a list of multiple arguments to our Docker run command. Okay, instead of that, it's very easy to maintain all these configurations in a single file and then use that file to create your containers. Now let's do Jenkins. Let's do this same thing for Jenkins. Okay, so how to do it? So inside this services, this is one service, Nexus. So we are going to define one more called Jenkins. Jenkins, this is a service, and let's define different aspects of this, like image. Now we have to take care of these indentations. Please understand, YAML is very strict in case of indentations. So this should go the level we have got these configurations, right? These configurations, whatever the indentation level they are right now. So the same indentation we should follow when we will define these settings for our next service, right? So this image, so here we will define image for our Jenkins. So let's define it. So for our Jenkins, we were using image. Let me just take it from here only.
Basically, this might have been covered in the previous session, but I just wanted to know, like, what's meant by this YAML file?
Yeah. I'll talk about that YAML file in few minutes. Container name. So what should be the name of our container? Name is, let's say, Jenkins. Okay, then ports, which port we want to forward. So we want to forward the port 8080. Internal port we want to forward it to 8083. So this will go here, ports, and what should be the external port? What we want as an external port, we want 8083 colon. What is our internal port? 8081. And we only want to publish single port. Here we publish multiple ports because this 8081 is the port of our Nexus repository manager, and this 8085 is the HTTP connector port which we had created for our Docker registry or Docker repository, right? So that's why we have published two ports here, and here we have to only publish single port 8081, which we are publishing to 8083. Another point is our volume. So let's define a volume for this container. And in a volume we have to say Jenkins data, and which location from the container we want to mount. We want to mount this. Right? And here we have to define this. This also we had discussed yesterday, that what is this, what is the meaning of this, and what is the meaning of this. Basically, when we had seen the command called docker create volume, here I'm just revising it, whatever we had discussed yesterday about these two things. So we have a command here to create a volume, docker create volume. Just a minute, let me just, here. So docker volume create, it actually creates a volume, and then when we want to use it to mount some location from the container which we are creating, so we define that volume using this -v. So this volume we can create using docker volume create, something like this, docker volume create. So we create a volume and then we attach this volume to our container right, using this. So same things we are doing here. We are in the volumes for this particular service. I am defining which volumes I want to use and which location inside the container I want to mount. So I have defined this, the name of the volume, colon, name of the location I want to mount, right? And here in the volumes I am defining this name here. So what is the difference? When we will run the DockerCompose command, our DockerCompose will create different objects. First type of object it will create is these services, meaning it will create different containers from these services. Another type of object it will create is volumes. So it will create volumes, which is equivalent to running this command, docker volume create and nexus dash data and Jenkins dash data, right? So it will create these volumes, and then those volumes would be attached to the containers we are creating here. Now if we want to define the environment variables from the compose YAML, so we can do that using environment. This is another key, environment, and we can set our different environment variables as a list of values. This is also we had discussed yesterday, that how to define the environment variables. One way is to define them in a file and define that file as env underscore file inside the definition of that service. This is one way we can define the environment variables, and you have to use those environment, or you have to define those environment variables in a file. This is a correct approach actually. Your environment variable should not be part of your compose file. Actually they should be external to your compose, because if you wish to change any environment variable, then there is no need to go to the compose and do the modifications there, right? So it's always good practice to have your environment variables outside of the compose and then define that env inside your compose file. But just as an example I am showing you, if at all you wish to define your environment variables inside the compose, how can we do it? So let's see that. Let me just check which environment variable we had set for our Jenkins at all. If we have set, just a minute, let me just see, Jenkins underscore home. Okay, let me just check the environment variables, list of environment variables which the Jenkins container needs. So let me go to their official Docker page and let's see what environment variables they need. So this is the documentation, and we'll see what environment variables it requires. This Java opts, this is one of the environment variable. Java options, like how much memory, or you know what logging and all it needs, or even Java Jenkins Java opts also correct. So let me see if we can set these environment variables. I'm just checking if we have any other environment variable which we can set. Okay. Never mind, let's set this environment variable. Doesn't matter which environment variable we are setting. So this we have to set like this: Java_ops, and the information about a compose we can get from how to define different settings and all. So for that there is a official website, DockerCompose. See, this is the official documentation for a compose. This also I had talked about yesterday. So the name of the environment variable equal to, and then we have to set the value of it. So let me set this value. This is how you can set the. Now if you want to set any other environment variable, let's say name. Right, so you can set the list of environment variables. This we used to do using docker run command. We used to do this in this way. I'll show you how we used to do it in our docker run command, just to make you easy to understand how the docker compose solves our problem. See, we used to do this -e, and then the environment variable name equal to value, -e again, environment variable name equal to value. So we used to give multiple arguments -e to set the different environment variables that we are achieving with the help of this. Right, so let's save this and let's start the containers now. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to start the, let me go inside this directory. This is the directory. Right, this is the directory. I have my, I'm just deleting this my.env from here. So this is the directory, this one. This is where I have this DockerCompose file created, and this env also is defined in that same directory. So what we need to do is we need to start the command prompt. We need to enter into this directory using cd. So this is my working directory now, where I have my compose file, and we need to run one command. This command also I had mentioned yesterday, and that command I have also noted down here. See this one, DockerCompose. Now the command will not be docker run, it would be DockerCompose, then -f and the path of our YAML. So my YAML, this YAML, this one is in the same directory where I am currently inside. So I am not defining the full path, I am just defining a name, -f, and then up is the command which tells the DockerCompose to create all the resources defined in the compose YAML. Okay, so this up will create all the resources defined here. Resources meaning these services, this one as well as this one, as well as the volumes. That is what up does. And when you want to remove them, that is what we used to do also, right? When we say docker run, so docker run creates the containers. Then if you want to stop and clean up everything, then we used to do docker container stop, name of the container which we want to stop, and then docker rm, docker container rm or docker prune. So those things now we would be doing using the creation part. Instead of docker run, we would be using docker compose up, and here we are going to define which YAML a docker compose should take up to create the resources from. And then detach mode. We also had discussed about this detach mode. This is what we used to do with the docker run command also. If you see our docker run command, we have here -d, which starts the container in detach mode. It doesn't add the containers logs to our command prompt, right? So detach mode, same we can achieve using --detach. Now if I hit enter, just a minute, I think I have done some mistake here. --detach, just a second, let me just take this. Just a moment. Docker compose -f, this YAML up and detach. This is the command we had used yesterday. Just a minute, let me see if I have done any mistake here. Let me check the compose up, detach. DETACH. Oh, okay. Correct. DETACH it should be. Okay. So understood. So this should be smooth. Correct. And let's run now. See, now it is creating the volumes as well as creating the containers. So now if I check docker container ps, my containers are up. Now I have started 2 containers. Previously, if we want to start these 2 containers, we had to execute 2 different docker run commands, and that too with, you know, pretty much long docker run commands, which consists of different settings we want to provide at the time of creating the containers. And docker compose down. So there is a command called docker compose down. So now what this docker compose down will do, it will delete everything. Whatever has been created as a part of this compose, this whatever we have defined, whatever objects we have defined in this YAML, right? Services, volumes, everything now would be deleted once I run docker compose down. See, now it is stopping the containers and it is removing them also. Now this is very handy when it comes to working with multiple containers. If you are working on an application which consists of, as I said, 5 containers, now it becomes very difficult if you are not using compose YAML, no? Then you have to run 5 different docker run commands, that too with providing different details about volumes, environment variables, images, container name and all that stuff. Also cleaning up becomes very difficult. You have to stop each container individually using Docker container stop command, and also you have to run Docker container prune to remove all those containers. Now this becomes very handy if you have defined all of those things in a compose YAML and then you are running it. So I'll just start it again. Docker compose up and detach. See, it has created the containers. Now let's check Docker container ps. Now we can access the logs of these containers also. This we have already seen, Docker container logs, Jenkins. See, and I can access my Jenkins now. Let it start. Page 8083. We should be able to see Jenkins. Yeah, it is starting. Yeah, Jenkins is up and running. So let's, okay, let me see. Docker container. Okay. Correct. And let me see Docker container logs Nexus. Yeah, Nexus is also up. Correct. So let's check if we can access Nexus. Yes, we are able to access Nexus. I think the issue is that we should define here port as 8080. I wrongly defined it as 8081 because Jenkins internally runs on 8080 and not 8081. Nexus runs on 8081. So let's do Docker Compose down and again up. So Docker Compose down, I want to down everything. See, I am stopping and removing the containers and removing all the required stuff. And then now what I'll do is I'll again do Docker Compose up and detachment. See, this is very easy now. As we have configured everything, we don't need to remember that long docker run command and provide everything there. We don't need to do it. We have defined everything whatever we need in this compose, and then we are simply running this small command of Docker Compose up. And let's run Docker container logs Jenkins. Now let it start and then we should be able to access Jenkins. Yes, so we are now able to access Jenkins. So now we are able to access the Jenkins. Right, so we are able to access the Jenkins now. We can go inside it and we are also able to access our Nexus. Right, so these two services are running inside the container, but we are not creating those containers using Docker run command, but we are defining all the details of about them in a DockerCompose file, and then we are running those. Now if we want to see if those environment variables, these environment variables, if they have been set in my container or not, so that I can check by going inside docker exec -it, name of the container sh, and here I can say echo $name. See, Pranodaya. This is what I have set here inside the environment, right? So this is very handy option actually, that defining the details inside a compose file and running your all containers using DockerCompose up and DockerCompose down will help you in removing all the containers you have started.